strategies poorly, and it was all because you were so adamant about teaching conflict. And I was like, well, Vince, I'm like, that's the whole idea. Is you're supposed to apply this stuff to your world, because if you apply it to your world, right, that increases the motivation, like what Flower said. So obviously, it's clear that if we can bring learning to life or make it applicable to the learner's world, right, they're going to have better recall, and obviously it's going to increase their motivation. And I noticed that someone in the chat had talked about expectancy value theory, and that's exactly it, right? It's going to make it a lot more enjoyable for them if they can say, oh, I can use this stuff. And I think that, when students ask things like, questions like, hey, this is going to be on the exam, what we really want them to say instead is, hey, can I use this for this? Or, hey, will I be able to use this in my career for that? Like, we want to make it so obvious to them that they can't not see it in their life. So there's a lot of different ways that we can bring learning to life, right? And sticking with this whole spooky theme, you think about Frankenstein, right? Bringing him to life, right? It's not going to take, it's not as difficult as essentially bringing something back from the dead, right? It's actually a lot easier, and AI is going to help us a lot with that. So let's look at our first example. And the first example, this is a prompt that you could use in ChatGPT right now if you wanted to, right? We want to give you some example prompts if you are in that, again, that B bucket where you haven't used AI yet. So you can literally ask ChatGPT this question: hey, can you help me come up with a good, and I always use pop culture reference as my example, right? Because my students are watching things that I've never even heard of, and I don't even know that exists anymore. So I always like to ask ChatGPT, give me a pop culture reference that can explain, and then I put in the concept. So we'll show you an example of this prompt here right now. So I asked for a good pop culture reference to showcase educational scaffolding, and of course, guess what comes up? The Karate Kid. Now, in full disclosure, I watched The Karate Kid probably 100 times when I was a teenager. But you know what the problem is? The problem is my students today, they would have no idea what The Karate Kid is. And so, guess what? With AI, if you're not happy with the response, you get to have a dialogue with it, just like it's an actual person. So when I said, hey, look, my students are going to understand this. They weren't born in the 80s. Of course, they gave me Baby Yoda. And so, yes, exactly. that we have to set it to a certain year range. But here's the reality, and this is the point that I want to make clear. This is just a hook, right? So if you remember Blues Traveler, you know the chorus, right? The hook brings us in, and the prompt was just simply, can you give me a pop culture reference to explain whatever the concept is? And so we've used this as a hook. And yes, they might have watched The Karate Kid with where I'm trying to think of Jackie Chan was Mr. Miyagi, so they might have seen that one as well, but I haven't seen that one. All right, well, guess what? If you've never used AI before and you're worried about the prompt, you're concerned about this thing called prompt engineering, I want to introduce you to my new best friend, Conmigo. And thank you, Sean, for introducing me to Conmigo. Conmigo